Hello and welcome to another episode of Cake Fight Presents The Making of Kaleidoscope. I'm writer, director, producer Paige Feldman, and this week, as every week, I'm taking you inside my process of making my debut feature film. We're going from idea to premiere in real time. So last week I gave you some musings on beginnings and why I think they are the most important part of your film or script, and it's all about how they relate to the ending. This week, I was looking at the beginning of my script for Kaleidoscope and revising it, and there was this one 4-page scene, an argument between two characters, that I knew I could probably cut in half, and that was really necessary, and it is really necessary because the first draft of this script is 263 pages. So I cut the scene in about half, from 4 pages to about 2.5, and then I realized that one of the characters in this scene, I had made him a completely different personality type towards the end of the script. And it was a personality type I love to write. It's a himbo. But at the very beginning of this script, he wasn't a himbo. I hadn't realized that that was his character yet. So I had to rewrite my rewrite. And in doing so, I learned a lot of things about my revision process that I'd love to share with you. So let's roll those titles, and then I'm gonna turn on screen share. Alright, welcome back, and let's not delay. Let's just jump right into the screen share. Here I have 3 different versions of the scene in PDF form: the original, the length pass that I did, and the character pass that I did. To set you up, first of all, this scene takes place from page 17 to 21 of the first draft of Kaleidoscope. So here's what the scene's about. Jonah, our male lead, is a stand-up comedian, and he's just finished performing a set at his brother Zach's party. Zach is an A-list movie star and has invited a lot of big entertainment types to his party, including an up-and-coming Sundance director who is looking to collaborate with a comedy writer on his next project. Jonah is hoping that his in with Zach and the set that he performed is enough to get him a meeting or maybe even secure the job. Jonah looks out into the crowd immediately after his set and watches as his brother says goodbye to the director before he can get there to say hello. Jonah feels like Zach is pushing him away from the director on purpose, like maybe Zach doesn't believe in him. At the end of this argument, which escalates through Jonah being a bit boorish and loud and obnoxious, well, the climax is that Zach actually doesn't think Jonah has enough talent for this. And Jonah walks away in a huff, but not without making it seem like the whole thing was some grand piece of performance art to save his brother's face. So that's what the scene's about. 4-page argument, just about that. That's a lot of pages, and that's a lot of talking about one topic. So I went into this scene when I was revising looking to cut it down by half. And I did almost get it down by half. So this here is the after the length pass, and we go from 4 full pages in the original to 2.5 right here. How did I do it? First, I read this scene as a whole, the original, the whole thing, and figured out what it was about, what my character's motivations were. Jonah wants to find out the truth and get a meeting with this director. Zach wants to keep the hurtful truth from Jonah, but ultimately can't. Those are the objectives. That's the outcome. That's what the scene needs to do, regardless of how long or short it is. Did I agree with that objective? I had to ask myself that because this whole script is very full of things, and some of them don't necessarily need to be there. But in this case, yes, I agreed with this objective. I agreed that this scene needed to be in the script. Second, I read through the scene and looked for redundant beats. Every action line, every line of dialogue needs to advance the scene in some way. All right, so here's an example of a redundant beat that I got rid of. So on page 2 here of the original, Zach says he has a vision. Just because someone's not famous doesn't mean they're not talented. You should know that. Jonah says, I should know that, but... And Zach says, I have a point. I'm not compromising genius with something he doesn't think is right. You're talented. You'll find your place someday. In this exchange right here, Jonah has asked Zach to reiterate what he's saying. I don't quite understand what these lines are doing, to be honest. The objective here is Zach is telling Jonah he's not going to stick his neck out for him in this case. We don't need him to say no twice, especially in this fashion, especially when there's no new information being revealed. You're talented, you'll find your place someday is basically the same as just because someone's not famous doesn't mean they're not talented. You should know that. It's as if Zach is telling Jonah, you're talented, but you're talented regardless. You're talented, you're talented. We only need that once. So I deleted, I should know that, but, and I have a point. So here's what it looks like in the length pass version. Zach says at the very bottom of page 1 now, just because someone's not famous doesn't mean they're not talented. You should know that. And we go immediately to Jonah saying, if I'm so fucking talented, why are you just letting him leave after one impression? I could send my writing samples over. So right here, instead of Jonah agreeing he's talented and then asking Zach again, like, what do you mean? Jonah just leaps directly to, all right, you say I'm talented, fine, do this for me. And that escalates the conflict because obviously Zach doesn't want to because he doesn't think Jonah is talented enough. The other thing to do here is to look for information that is redundant to the audience. So in the previous scene before this one, when Jonah was doing stand-up, all the jokes he told are jokes about how Zach is so much better than him. In the original version of this scene, we have a line here. Jonah says, but what? I killed tonight. You heard them. You heard me. I was on fucking fire. Jack says, but all your jokes are about me and how shitty you are compared to me. The audience has literally just come from watching Jonah tell like 5 jokes in a row about how Zach is so much better than he is. Zach doesn't need to reiterate this. We know it. So in this length pass version, Jonah says, I killed tonight. You heard them. You heard me. I was on fucking fire. Zach just says, your shtick isn't his vibe. I added the word shtick in here because I realized that there's very little Yiddish in this script despite everyone being Jewish. So added shtick, good word for comedy, good Yiddish word. Otherwise, though, Zach doesn't explain, oh, but these are the jokes you told. He just says, your shtick. And everybody knows what it is because we literally just saw it. So that's another way to cut redundant beats. All right, so we've looked for redundant beats, we've looked for information that the audience would find redundant, and now it's time to look for redundancy on a smaller level, which is just individual words in lines and description. We're like a Department of Redundancy department over here. In description, you want to be as concise as possible while also drawing a really clear picture. And the very beginning, here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. As the laughter crescendos, Jonah runs off stage, invigorated and euphoric, his eyes trained on Jack, Colby, and Zach. They say a few words to each other, ones we can't hear. Jonah tries desperately to get to them ASAP, but he's sidelined by people in the audience, slapping him on the back and congratulating him. Jack, Colby, and Zach exchange a hand-slappy handshake, and Jack Colby walks off moments before Jonah reaches them. It's pretty long, and there's quite a bit of redundancy there, so I'll show you what I did here. As the laughter crescendos, Jonah runs off stage, invigorated and euphoric, his eyes trained on Jack, Colby, and Zach. They're talking. Jonah tries desperately to reach them, but he's sidelined by randoms congratulating him. Jack, Colby, and Zach exchange a hand-slappy handshake, and Jack Colby walks off moments before Jonah reaches them. So things I did here. First, Jack, Colby, and Zach are talking to each other, saying words we can't hear. Obviously, we can't hear them if I haven't written the dialogue. So, his eyes trained on Jack, Colby, and Zach, they're talking. Instead of they exchange words, they're talking. Then we go, Jonah tries desperately to get to them ASAP. If he's trying desperately to get to them, it's gonna be ASAP. So I consolidated, tries desperately to reach them instead of desperately to get to them ASAP. He says he's sidelined by people in the audience slapping him on the back and congratulating him. People in the audience, they're just random people, so I've called them randoms. It's a voice choice. You can say people in the audience still, that's not necessarily redundant, but what is redundant, congratulating him and slapping him on the back. Because the back slaps are meant to be congratulatory, so you just have to say congratulating. And so cut that down from 8 lines to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines. And we'll get it down to 5 in the character pass. Next, I want to talk about dialogue, because description, really easy, just make it efficient and clear. For dialogue, you don't want to find the most efficient way for someone to say something. That is, first of all, boring, and second of all, everyone's going to sound the same. And not human either, because people aren't efficient talkers. So dialogue's a little bit trickier. Especially for me, because I like to have characters who have verbal tics, and one of the verbal tics I like the most is for people to repeat words or find ways to rephrase what they're saying while they're in the middle of saying it. So the line that I've drawn for myself as far as repetition goes in dialogue is that the repetition needs to add something. Whether it's character or a better turn of phrase, it needs to be additive. It needs to add to the character of the script, the vibe of the story, characterization of a person. So I'm going to show you an example of a time when I let repetition stay. It's actually one of the lines that we just looked at. But what? I killed tonight. You heard them. You heard me. I was on fucking fire. You heard them. You heard me. The word heard is repeated, but it's repeated for effect. Phrase, I killed tonight and I was on fucking fire. Those are saying the same thing. I'm struggling to try to figure out how to explain why this repetition works. And I think maybe the best way to do it is to show you a repetition that doesn't work that I changed. Top of page 2 here in the original. Don't pull that shit on me, Zach. You're not just an actor. You're Zach fucking... His last name's now Ruby. So Zach fucking Ruby. Box office gold. You can do any kind of movie you want right now. You can make demands. And then the line goes on. So this same line is right here on the bottom of page 1. And it's, don't pull that false humility shit on me, Zach. You're not just an actor. You're Zach fucking Ruby. Box office gold. You can make demands. So the thing that I took out here is you could do any kind of movie you want right now. That means the same thing as box office gold. Except box office gold is a very descriptive and lively way to talk about that. You can do any movie you want right now. That doesn't add to the conversation. Then I go back here. I killed tonight. That's the topic sentence. Then you heard them. You heard me. That's the proof. And the conclusion is I was on fucking fire. It's not just that he killed, it was like he felt it, the audience felt it, everyone felt it. There's emphasis in his argument here. I don't know, I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this. It feels different to me. And I guess the lesson is go with your instincts. But if you find repetition where saying something twice isn't interesting, especially in dialogue, say it once. But if you have someone whose character repeats a bunch of stuff, just make sure they repeat where it counts, because otherwise it'll get old or be a really skillful gag that I applaud you for. So then in cutting, I started looking for dialogue that could be cut because instead a glance or a look would just work. And figuring out when this sort of thing works takes some skill. So if you're looking for a way to practice or try to get yourself in a mindset of when will a glance do instead of dialogue, I have a couple suggestions. First, I mean, if you make a short film, that's the way that I learned. I really didn't even know how to look for it, or that's something I should look for until I started directing. The first day of shooting, an actress was having such trouble with a line, but then I watched her on the monitor and realized she was saying the line with the look she was giving her scene partner before the line even left her mouth. So I told her, forget the line, internalize it like you've been doing. And that's the take that we went with in the final edit, and it was way more powerful than the dialogue. If you don't want to make a short film, if it's not something that you can do, I have a couple other suggestions. First, act out the scene. Read it aloud, play the characters, notice what your face is doing, notice what your voice is doing, notice when you pause, see how that compares to what you have on the page. And maybe sometimes it doesn't feel right to say a line when you're in the middle of a certain emotion. Take that out. And finally, if you're just not an actor, don't really want to get into that feeling, you could take a favorite movie and watch it on mute and just watch how the actors' faces tell the story. I was looking for examples of this at the top of page 3 here. There's a moment that I should have cut because a glance could do anyway. right after Zach eviscerates Jonah, tells him, hey, I don't think you're talented. I have right here in the bottom, page 2, Jonah crumbles. And then this 3-line right here, which is completely unnecessary. If Jonah crumbles and starts to walk away, this is his internal monologue. You're right, I should do everything on my own. No one should help me. I haven't ever proven I've deserved it. That's not a line he needs to say. He can just walk away and say that with his body language. Last, but definitely not least, actually my favorite tip for cutting here is something that I think an old screenwriting teacher told me, which is that delete lines that don't allow your audience to make leaps in logic. Not huge leaps, but small leaps. I'll show you. So on page 2 here of this original script, Zach says, I have a point. I'm not compromising genius with something he doesn't think is right. You're talented. You'll find your place someday. Jonah says, when, Zach? And Zach says, I don't know. Then Jonah says, if I'm so fucking talented, why are you just letting him leave after one impression? The idea with a leap in logic is that in this version, I cut, just because someone's not famous doesn't mean they're not talented. You should know that. If I'm so fucking talented, why are you just letting him leave after one impression? I cut all of this when, Zach, and I don't know stuff because if someone says you're talented, you'll find your place, and then you say, if I'm talented, blah, 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 the when is implied. That's a leap in logic. It's not that you're taking one thing that happens and then just skipping forward to step 8. It's you're taking one thing that someone says, one thing that happens, and then assuming that people understand the questions that someone will ask to get to the next logical step. It's like jumping across stepping stones instead of walking on a sidewalk. So I finished this, I got it down to 2.5 pages. Here we go, 2.5 pages, which I'm really proud of. So those are the steps that I took to get this scene from 4 pages down to 2.5. I was really proud of myself, moving forward a great way. And then I remembered that I made Zach a himbo starting in like the halfway point. And I love Zach as a himbo. I think it works really well to have Jonah as this acerbic, anxiety-riddled comedian going up against his foil of a brother who's just like lovable, dumb hunk. But as a himbo, Zach can't be making self-centered, lofty, eviscerating comments to Jonah. He needs to be breaking Jonah's heart in an innocent and sweet manner. So I had to go and rewrite the scene again. Before I get into this character path stuff, I just wanted to ask if you're enjoying this craft discussion, if you could hit the thumbs up button. It'll help me know what kind of content to make more. I want to entertain you all while also giving a log of all I'm doing to make this film possible. So if you like the craft stuff, hit the thumbs up. If you want something different, put it in the comments. I will read and respond to all of them. So thank you. And now, on to the character paths. And here are some of the things I did to rewrite it to change Zach's character. First, I chose just a few little phrases or some language choices. Here we have your shtick isn't his vibe in this short one. And then here in the character pass, your shtick isn't his vibe, it's nothing personal, bro. First of all, I used the word bro. And second, I used it's nothing personal. Zach's like, laissez-faire, whatever, dude. It's cool. It's just not his thing. We're gonna roll with it. It creates a different vibe, I guess, for the scene. Another catchphrase that I added is party atmosphere, which is what Zach says to try to calm Jonah down. Like, hey, it's a party. We're all having a good time. So top of page 2. Jay, come on, party atmosphere. Also, I have Zach calling Jonah Jay. Chill, casual, cool, buds. That's the himbo way. Next, I knew that in order to make Zach a himbo, I needed to add some levity to this scene. Add a jokey moment where Zach acts a little dumb. There's a line at the very end of this original scene right here. It's, don't worry, I'm coming back. After Jonah's walking off just upset. I'm coming back, where else do I have to go? And besides, who else knows to pick up your dry cleaning in the morning? That was just an aside, something I tossed in there as like a depressing, God, Jonah's life sucks sort of thing. And I kind of kept it in here in a more morbid way. Who else do you respect so little that you ask them to pick up your dry cleaning in the morning after the length pass? It's a bit of a mouthful, though. I'm not a big fan of it. But here, in this character pass, when I was looking for a joke, I thought, and this is something I often do in the rewrite, is, well, what do I already have in this scene? What can I play off of it? I thought, well, what if there is dry cleaning? What if Zach brings up dry cleaning? So here's what I did. Zach says, you're sticking his vibe. It's nothing personal, bro. Jonah's crestfallen. Zach pats his shoulder, comforting. Oh, but I do have something for you. Zach pulls out a card. A business card? Jonah takes it, hope in his eyes. When he looks at it, the hope turns to rage. I chose business card size because there is a bunch of business later with the business card, not to be redundant. So there's going to be some nice symmetry within this scene and how it plays out throughout the time loops as Jonah keeps collecting business cards that he can never use. Zach says, what's your face all scrunchy? It's that dry cleaning receipt I lost. Zach's super excited. He found his lost dry cleaning receipt. And then Jonah says, I'm about to lose it. Zach says, go put it in your room then. That's like silly little exchange. And then Jonah gets real mad and insists Zach tell him what's going on, dude. And then at the end, don't worry, I'm coming back. Who else knows to pick up your dry cleaning on Monday? So instead of tomorrow morning, I just said Monday, changed the feeling a little. And the last thing I did to make sure that Zach's character felt more like the character I want him to be is I took a look at the monologue, the climax of this scene where Zach admits that he doesn't think Jonah has talent. And a himbo wouldn't on purpose hurt anybody. So I couldn't make Zach be so cold and direct. Instead, I turned the monologue around into something else. So I'm going to read the first version of Zach basically telling Jonah that he doesn't think he can hack it. And Zach says, I'm sorry. You think I like having to employ my big brother as my assistant? You think I like letting you live here rent-free while I watch your mediocre, self-deprecating, sad excuse for a comedic career inch further and further towards a success that will never happen? I'd love to have you out of my hair and out of my shadow, and yet... ... Well, no, it's dashes. But that's really brutal. I changed it in the length pass. Really, just I have Zach saying it quietly. That's really the only change I made substantively. There's a little bit of tweaking, but not much. So then in this character pass, here's how Zach calls out Jonah as not having any talent. Zach grabs Jonah by the shoulder, though it feels like the scruff of the neck, and whispers, I love having you as my assistant, bro, and my roommate. But watching you try to make it as a comedian telling mediocre, self-loathing jokes that somehow make us both look bad, it hurts me. I'd love to have you out of my hair and out of my shadow, but until you can love yourself like I love myself, I just can't. I actually don't love it 100%, but it is softer and better. Things that I would change right now is watching you try to make it as a comedian telling self-loathing jokes instead of mediocre. Doesn't have to say mediocre. Again, with the redundancy, we know from this, really, especially for someone who's not super smart and who's trying to be caring, pointed dialogue. Someone who's grabbing his brother by the shoulder and just trying to, like, not embarrass him. Mediocre is sort of implied here. So I'd cut mediocre. And then instead of I'd love to have you out of my hair, I would say something like, I'd love for you to cast your own shadow, except not on me because I need to make sure I'm always in my best light. Something silly, himbo-ish, but also implying that Zach wants him to succeed. But the idea is that he leads with love. I love having you as my assistant, bro. Uses bro and my roommate instead of living here rent-free. Just calls it a roommate. There's something gentler about it. It's the same message and the same impact. Jonah rips himself from Zach's grasp and strides away. Jonah is going to walk away. He knows what Zach's saying, but the delivery is completely different. This character pass, while it is about half a page longer, and it could be shorter, so I could cut stuff like right here, not the receipt, the metaphysical it. Zach says, what? Jonah says, my last shreds of hope and sanity. I could probably cut Zach saying what and combine my last shreds of hope and sanity with this line up here, and maybe even have a parenthetical that says off Zach's look to show that Jonah is answering Zach's question. And that's something that kind of is, well, not kind of is, it is about deleting dialogue that doesn't make leaps in logic, which I talked about when I was talking about doing the length pass. But again, this is just a revision of, well, revision of a revision of the first draft. There are going to be many more rewrites to come, so I'm not too worried about getting it perfect right now. I just want to get it better than it was before. So I wanted to show you these three versions of this scene to show you that rewriting is not just about reworking what you have in your script. It's about trying to find the things that you want your script to be and imbuing them into the actual draft. Because I could very easily have just gone on, cut that scene down to 2.5 pages, and said, all right, moving on, be done with it. But that's not going to make the script better. It's just going to make it shorter. The character pass, that's the one that's going to make the script better, because even though it's a little bit longer than the pass where I cut for length, it's also the one that's truest to what my script, to my film, is going to be in the end. And that is, I think, way more important than trying to make my script as short as it can possibly be right at first. Thank you all so much for watching this week. I hope you enjoyed this and learned something about revision, and I can't wait to share more of my journey about the making of Kaleidoscope with all of you next week. If you want to see what the script looks like on the pages, that's 17. That's 18 with a whole new part. The blue is all the character pass. It's hard to turn pages like this. 19. A little bit nicer, but a lot of stuff crossed off. 20. A huge mess. And we just stopped right there on the top of 21. So that's what on-paper revision looks like.